You're the one who always shows up, the one who says yes, the one who sacrifices sleep time and comfort to help others solve problems they created. You're useful, reliable, the go-to person. And yet here's the paradox: the more you give, the more invisible you become. The more dependable you are, the more people stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as a tool. You're not thanked, you're expected. You're not respected, you're assumed. And over time, something inside you begins to break. A quiet resentment grows, not because you don't want to help, but because you've realized your value is conditional. People only reach out when they need something. When you're in pain, they vanish. When you speak, they talk over you. When you finally say no, they act like you've betrayed them. Carl Jung warned about this dynamic long before modern psychology caught up. He understood that when people suppress their needs and emotions just to maintain approval, they begin to lose their identity. They become shadows of themselves, operating, functioning, performing, but no longer fully alive. And here's the terrifying part: society rewards this. It praises selflessness, but only when it's convenient. It applauds your sacrifice, but only if it benefits others. And if you dare to speak up, if you dare to reclaim space, suddenly you're difficult, uncooperative, selfish. But maybe the real selfishness is a society that teaches people their worth is tied to how much they produce for others, that their humanity is only recognized when it's packaged as service, that being useful is the highest virtue, but being seen, understood, and protected, that's optional. Carl Jung called this an act of self-betrayal, because in trying to be everything for everyone, you abandon yourself. And invisibility isn't just a social phenomenon, it becomes an internal state. You start believing you don't matter unless you're performing, unless you're solving, unless you're fixing someone else's life. But here's the truth you need to sit with: being useful is not the same as being valued. And if you don't learn the difference, you will burn yourself out trying to earn a place in a system that was never designed to notice you. Carl Jung didn't just study the mind. He studied what happens to the soul when it's forced to shrink to survive. He believed that every human being carries within them a self, a totality of who they are, including their desires, instincts, flaws, and potential. But when society demands compliance, many people start amputating parts of that self just to be accepted. They suppress their anger. They silence their needs. They smile through exhaustion. Over time, they become hollow versions of who they once were, outwardly functional, inwardly fragmented. This is how invisibility begins. Not with someone ignoring you, but with you slowly erasing yourself. Jung called this psychological phenomenon the persona, the mask we wear to function in society. It's necessary, of course. Everyone needs a social identity. But the danger comes when the mask fuses to the skin, when the act becomes the default, when you're no longer pretending to be the helpful one. You've become it entirely. And in that transformation, you've disconnected from the very parts of you that once gave you joy, passion, and presence. Jung warned that the longer you live in the persona, the more distant you become from the self. And here's where it gets dangerous: when you lose that connection, you stop knowing what you want. You stop trusting your instincts. You stop feeling like you have a right to exist outside of what you do for others. You're alive, but not centered. Breathing, but not grounded. Always moving, but never quite here. The world doesn't make it easy to reconnect. It rewards personas. It promotes people who perform roles well, especially roles that are convenient to others. The invisible servant, the silent supporter, the emotional fixer. These personas keep society running, but they do so at the expense of the individual's wholeness. And for people like you, people who've been useful for so long, they don't even realize how much of themselves they've lost until something breaks, until a crisis forces them to stop. And in the silence, they discover a terrifying emptiness where a self used to be. That's not drama, that's psychology. Jung saw it clearly. And he believed that unless you begin reclaiming the parts of yourself you've buried for the sake of others, you'll continue to be useful but never fully seen. You'll continue to serve but never fully live. The harsh truth is this: the more useful you are, the easier it is for people to stop seeing you as a person. Not because they're evil, but because utility is seductive. When someone consistently provides value without resistance, people begin to view that value as an entitlement, not a gift. Your help becomes expected. Your time becomes assumed. Your energy becomes invisible. And before long, your identity is reduced to a function, something people call on when they need something and ignore when they don't. Jung warned about this psychological dynamic. He understood that human relationships often unconsciously follow the path of least resistance. If someone always plays the role of caretaker, others will naturally settle into the role of being cared for. Not out of malice, but out of inertia. And so the more you show up, the more others disappear from the equation. The more you make things easier, the less they think about your effort. You're no longer a full human being. You're a support beam, valued only when you crack, replaced when you collapse. Here's where it gets darker. Many people don't just exploit your usefulness. They depend on your silence to do it. If you start asserting yourself, setting boundaries, or expressing needs, you become difficult. If you say no, you're suddenly selfish. If you stop solving everyone's problems, you're abandoning them. That's the trap. The world builds invisible cages around people who make life easier for others and then punishes them for trying to leave. Jung saw this clearly. He believed that every act of self-sacrifice, if not balanced with inner integration, eventually creates resentment. But here's the twisted part: people will guilt you for even feeling that resentment. You're told to be grateful. You're told that your value comes from how much you give, how much you carry, how little you need. And over time, you internalize it. You start believing that you only matter when you're useful, that love must be earned, that space must be justified, that your worth is conditional. This is how psychological exploitation works, not with whips or chains, but with unspoken expectations, with quiet manipulations, with praise that doubles as control. You're so strong. We couldn't do this without you. It sounds like love, but it's a leash. Jung didn't want you to stop helping people. He wanted you to start helping yourself first. He believed that true individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires you to reclaim your own needs as sacred. Because the more you betray yourself for others, the more you teach the world to do the same. At first it feels noble. Being the one everyone relies on. Being strong. Being dependable. You think this is what makes me valuable. This is who I'm meant to be. You feel proud of how much you can carry. You feel needed. But slowly something begins to shift. People stop asking how you are. They only ask what you can do. They stop checking in. They just check boxes. You become a background character in your own life there to serve the plot lines of everyone else. And here's the tragic irony. The more you serve, the less they see you. You become a tool, a function, a convenience. Your boundaries start to dissolve. Your exhaustion becomes invisible. And what's worse, people don't even realize it's happening. They assume you're fine because you've always been fine. They assume you don't need support because you never asked for it. They assume your silence is agreement. But it's not. It's self-erasure. Carl Jung understood this dynamic with piercing clarity. He warned that when we over-identify with the persona, the social mask we wear, we begin to lose touch with the self. The persona says, I'm the helpful one. I'm the fixer. I'm the good friend. But behind that mask is someone tired, someone resentful, someone longing to be seen for who they are, not just what they do. And here's the dark twist: you helped create this trap. You taught people how to treat you. You showed up every time, even when you were breaking. You said yes when your soul was screaming no. You smiled through the burnout. You made it look easy. And in doing so, you became invisible. Not by accident, but by pattern. This is the silent tragedy of being useful. It's not that people stop caring, it's that they stop noticing. And when you finally reach your breaking point, they're shocked. But you seemed fine. You never said anything. Why didn't you ask for help? And the answer is cruel in its simplicity, because you forgot you were allowed to. Jung would say this is the moment your shadow begins to stir. The part of you that's angry, the part that's tired of performing, the part that wants to scream. And if ignored long enough, that shadow will find its way out through bitterness, through passive aggression, through emotional collapse. It doesn't go away, it waits. And when it finally speaks, it doesn't whisper, it roars. So ask yourself, when did you start hiding behind your usefulness? When did you decide that your needs didn't matter? When did you begin trading visibility for validation? Because that's the deal the world offers you. Be what we need, and we'll keep you around. But stop being useful, and you might as well not exist. There comes a point when being useful doesn't feel noble anymore. It starts to feel like a burden, like a performance you can't stop. You begin to wonder, if I stop being helpful, would anyone still care? Would they still call? Would they still see me? Or would I vanish entirely like I was never really there to begin with? This is what Jung meant by the quiet destruction of the self. It doesn't happen in a dramatic explosion. It happens in tiny moments of neglect. Every time you say, I'm fine, when you're not. Every time you give more than you can afford. Every time you silence your discomfort for the sake of peace. Your sense of worth erodes not because others took it from you, but because you gave it away in pieces, believing it was the price of love. At first you don't notice the damage. You're too busy, too distracted. But over time you begin to feel hollow. Like you're moving through life behind glass. Like people are talking to you but not really seeing you. Like your presence is convenient, but your pain is invisible. And here's the part no one tells you: that kind of emotional erosion leaves deep scars. It creates a void where your sense of self used to live. You start questioning your worth, not just in relationships, but in every area of your life. Your confidence shrinks. Your voice softens. You hesitate to ask for things, to express needs, to take up space. Because somewhere along the way, you internalize the lie that your value depends on your output, that you're only worthy of attention if you're useful. Jung believed this was one of the great psychological tragedies of modern life, that people learn to measure their self-worth through productivity and sacrifice, instead of authenticity and presence. He saw how this damages the soul, not with obvious violence, but with quiet suffocation, with pressure to perform, with endless demands to be more, do more, give more, until there's nothing left but a shell. And what's worse is that this damage doesn't scream. It whispers. It hides behind a smile, behind, I've got it, behind, don't worry about me, and no one sees it until it's too late, until the breakdown, until the outburst, until the burnout. If you've been there, you know what it's like to cry alone because you didn't want to burden anyone, to collapse in private so you could show up in public, to feel like your pain doesn't count because you're the one who's supposed to hold everything together. But Jung would tell you this isn't strength. This is a wound disguised as responsibility. And if you don't tend to it, it won't just destroy your sense of worth, it will destroy your will to keep going. There's a strange comfort in being needed, a strange high that comes from being the one who can fix things, who always has the answer, who never lets anything fall apart. You start to believe that your worth is tied to that role, that without it, you're nothing. And so you stay in the role, even when it's killing you. This is what Carl Jung meant when he warned about the danger of identifying too strongly with the persona. At first, the mask is something you wear, but over time, it fuses with your face. You forget it's a mask at all. You start introducing yourself not by who you are, but by what you do. I help people. I solve problems. I take care of everyone. And those things might be true, but they're not the whole truth. They're not the soul behind the service. What makes this trap so hard to escape is that it gets rewarded. The more you play the role, the more people depend on you. The more people depend on you, the more they praise you. And that praise feels good until it doesn't. Because deep down, you start to realize they're not praising you. They're praising the mask, the performance, the utility, not the person underneath. It's like being trapped in a costume you can't take off. You start to fear what would happen if you stopped, if you dropped the act, if you said, "I'm tired, I need help, I can't keep doing this." You worry that people would walk away, that they'd be disappointed, that they'd see you as weak. And so you keep performing, you keep showing up, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of being unwanted, fear of being discarded, fear of discovering that your usefulness was the only reason people kept you around. Jung believed this was the great danger of over-identifying with any role. The moment you lose flexibility, the moment you can't step out of the mask without breaking down, you've lost touch with the self. You've become trapped in what he called a neurotic persona, a socially reinforced identity that exists not to express who you are, but to protect you from being forgotten. And here's the bitter truth. Even if you're aware of the trap escaping, it isn't easy, because the persona feels safe. It gives you a script, a purpose, a place. Dropping it means confronting the terrifying possibility that you don't know who you are without it. And that's what most people avoid, not just the fear of rejection, but the fear of facing their own emptiness. But Jung would say that the only way out is through, that healing begins the moment you stop performing and start listening to the quiet voice within the one you buried years ago. The one that doesn't want to be useful. It wants to be whole. At some point you reach a breaking point. You realize you've been pouring from an empty cup for years. You've silenced your needs so often that you don't even know what they are anymore. And when you finally try to say no, to step back, to choose yourself for once, something strange happens. You feel guilty, as if you've done something wrong, as if taking care of yourself is a betrayal. That guilt isn't an accident. It's the residue of years spent being praised for self-sacrifice. It's the echo of every compliment that reinforced the idea that your value comes from being available, reliable, useful. And now that you're trying to pull away from that role, the voice in your head whispers, "You're being selfish." They'll think you don't care. You're letting everyone down. But here's the truth. Jung would want you to hear. Caring for yourself is not selfish. It's survival. It's the only way to reconnect with the parts of you that got buried under responsibility. The only way to break free from the persona that's been smothering the self. Because until you reclaim your needs, your wants, your limits, you're not living. You're performing. And no matter how well you perform, it's never going to feel like enough. Because it never was supposed to. When you start choosing yourself, people will push back. They're used to the version of you that never says no. That always shows up. That quietly suffers to keep things running. And when that version disappears, they feel uncomfortable. They feel abandoned. But that discomfort isn't your burden to carry. It's theirs to process. This is the price of transformation. You will lose roles. You will lose approval. You might even lose relationships. But what you gain is far greater: your autonomy, your voice, your wholeness, and most importantly, your life. Jung believed that individuation, the journey of becoming your full self, required walking away from roles that no longer serve your soul. It meant stepping into discomfort, confronting your shadow, and unlearning the lie that you only matter when you're needed. Because beneath all that service, all that sacrifice, is a person who deserves to exist for more than just their usefulness. So if you feel guilty for putting yourself first, remember this. Your needs are not an inconvenience. Your boundaries are not an attack. Your rest is not laziness. They are the signs that you're healing, that you're waking up, that you're finally becoming visible to yourself. Carl Jung didn't just diagnose the problem. He offered a path out, a difficult path, but a necessary one. He called it individuation, the process of becoming whole, not perfect, not productive, whole. It's the long and often painful journey of peeling back the layers of who the world told you to be, so you can finally become who you are. For those who've spent their lives being useful, individuation starts with a terrifying question. If I'm not here to fix, to serve, to please, then who am I? It's a question that shakes your identity to its core, because when you've been defined by what you do for others, the idea of existing just for yourself feels empty, even wrong. But that's where the healing begins, in that silence, in that space where the mask starts to crack. Individuation means turning inward, not to retreat from the world, but to reconnect with the parts of you that have been ignored, suppressed, or exiled. The part of you that's angry, the part that's afraid, the part that wants things, the part that says no. This process isn't clean, it's not linear, and it's not always beautiful. Sometimes it looks like setting a boundary and then crying for hours because you're not used to disappointing people. Sometimes it means walking away from relationships that only saw your usefulness, not your humanity. Sometimes it means sitting alone in the dark, wondering if anyone will still love you once you stop performing. But over time, something shifts. The guilt begins to fade. The silence starts to feel like peace. The loneliness transforms into clarity. You begin to see yourself not as a function, not as a title, but as a soul. A full, complex, worthy soul. And here's what's truly radical. Jung believed that individuation wasn't just a personal journey, it was a moral one. Because when people stop outsourcing their worth to praise and usefulness, they become less easy to manipulate, less afraid to speak the truth, less likely to sell their authenticity for approval. A society full of individuated people is a society that's harder to control. That's why the process is so rare and so powerful. Individuation is the rebellion the world never expects. It's not loud. It doesn't seek applause, but it changes everything. It's when you finally look in the mirror and see you, not the fixer, not the helper, not the strong one, just you. And for the first time, that's enough. If you've made it this far, maybe you've seen it. That quiet erosion of the self, that invisible performance you've been trapped in for years. Maybe you've been the reliable one, the strong one, the one who never complains. And maybe you're exhausted. Carl Jung didn't write for perfect people. He wrote for those stuck between roles, for those haunted by the feeling that they've disappeared in service to everyone else. He believed that healing doesn't begin when the world finally appreciates you. It begins when you start appreciating yourself beyond your function, beyond your output, beyond your usefulness. You are not a machine. You are not a support beam. You are not the sum of how much others need you. You are a person, with edges, with needs, with a voice that deserves to be heard even when it says something unpopular. Especially then, the world will not give you permission to step away from your role. It will not applaud you for choosing rest or saying no or becoming whole. But that's okay. You're not doing this for applause. You're doing it because your soul is tired of pretending, because there's something inside you that wants to stop surviving and start living. So the next time you feel guilty for not being useful, remember this: your existence alone is enough. Your worth doesn't need to be proven, and your healing doesn't need to be convenient for anyone else. Take off the mask. Let yourself be seen, not as the fixer, not as the strong one, but as the full, breathing, wounded, awakening human you are. That's where individuation begins. That's where visibility begins. That's where you begin.